My name is Rachel, and I'm 38 years old. 3 weeks ago, I buried my husband of 12 years. Michael was 52 when he died. A sudden heart attack that took him from me on a Tuesday afternoon while he was supposed to be at a business conference in Chicago. The paramedics said he was gone before he hit the ground. No warning, no goodbye. Just a phone call from his assistant telling me that my husband had collapsed in a hotel lobby and there was nothing anyone could do. I was numb through the funeral planning, numb through the service, numb as I watched them lower his mahogany casket into the cold October earth. But it wasn't until 3 days after the burial that my numbness shattered into a million pieces. Because that's when I found the second phone. It was tucked inside the jacket pocket of the suit he'd been buried in. The charcoal Armani he'd worn to our 10th anniversary dinner. The funeral director had called me, stammering apologies, saying they discovered it during a routine check before sealing everything. Somehow, in the chaos of preparing his body, no one had thought to remove it. He asked if I wanted it destroyed or returned. I told him to bring it to me. The phone was an older iPhone model, one I'd never seen before. No case, no identifying marks. Just a simple black rectangle that felt like a grenade in my trembling hands. The battery was dead, of course, but I had a charger that fit. I plugged it in and waited, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When the screen finally lit up, there was no password, no security. Just a home screen with only 3 apps, a burner texting app, a photo gallery, and a calendar. I opened the messages first. There was only one contact saved. The name made my blood run cold. Jessie, my best friend since college, the maid of honor at my wedding, the godmother to my daughter. The woman who had held me while I sobbed at Michael's funeral, who had stayed at my house for a week afterward, making sure I ate and slept and didn't fall apart completely. I opened their message thread with shaking fingers. Years of conversations, years of I love you and I miss you, and when can I see you again? Years of my husband and my best friend talking about a future that didn't include me. But it was the last message that destroyed me. Sent from Michael's phone to Jessie's, time-stamped at 11:47 a.m. on the day he died, 43 minutes before his heart stopped. I told her I was in Chicago, flying to meet you in the Bahamas tonight. I'm finally leaving her, this time for real. I love you, Jay. See you in 12 hours. He wasn't at a business conference. He was leaving me. For her, and now I had to figure out what to do with that information. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. This story is going to be a long one, and I need you with me. Let me take you back to where it all began. I met Michael when I was 24 years old, fresh out of graduate school with a master's degree in art history and absolutely no idea what to do with my life. I was working at a small gallery in Boston, barely making rent, eating ramen 4 nights a week and telling myself it was romantic. The struggling artist lifestyle, even though I wasn't technically an artist. Michael walked in one rainy Thursday afternoon in September. He was 40 years old, distinguished, wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly salary. He had silver at his temples even then, and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He bought 3 paintings that day, totaling almost $50,000, and asked me to dinner. I said no the first time, and the second, and the third. But Michael was persistent. He sent flowers to the gallery. Not roses, that would have been too obvious. He sent birds of paradise and orchids, exotic arrangements that made my coworkers gasp. He left notes with them, funny ones, self-deprecating ones. Notes that showed he'd been listening when I talked about art, about my thesis on Renaissance portraiture, about my dreams of curating my own exhibition someday. On the 5th ask, I said yes. That first dinner was at a tiny Italian restaurant in the North End. Not the flashy place I'd expected, the one where hedge fund managers took their clients. This was a family-owned spot with red checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in old Chianti bottles. Michael told me later he'd researched it for weeks, asked everyone he knew for the most authentic, most romantic, least pretentious Italian food in the city. He listened to me that night, really listened. Not the way men usually do, where they're just waiting for their turn to talk about themselves. He asked questions. He remembered details. When I mentioned I was allergic to shellfish, he flagged down the waiter to confirm there was no cross-contamination in the kitchen. When I said my favorite painter was Artemisia Gentileschi, he didn't pretend to know who she was. He admitted he'd never heard of her and asked me to teach him. I fell in love with him over tiramisu and espresso. We were engaged within a year. My mother was thrilled. Finally, her daughter, who'd wasted her potential on art, was marrying someone respectable, someone wealthy, someone who could take care of me. My father just nodded quietly, the way he always did when my mother made decisions for our family. Jessie was the only one who expressed any doubt. "He's 16 years older than you, Rach," she said the night I showed her the ring. We were in her tiny apartment in Somerville, drinking cheap wine and eating pizza on her floor because she didn't have a couch yet. "That doesn't worry you at all?" "He's mature," I said. "He knows who he is. He's not playing games like guys our age." Jessie took a long sip of her wine. "I just want to make sure you're not rushing into anything. You've only known him a year." "You'll love him when you get to know him," I promised. "Everyone does." The irony of that statement would haunt me for the rest of my life. The wedding was beautiful. October ceremony at a vineyard in Vermont, leaves turning gold and crimson all around us. Jessie stood next to me in a burgundy dress, holding my bouquet while I said my vows. Michael cried when I walked down the aisle. His hand shook when he put the ring on my finger. His voice broke when he promised to love, honor, and cherish me until death did us part. I believed every word. The first year of marriage was a dream. Michael's wealth meant I didn't have to work at the gallery anymore. I could focus on my own research, my own writing, my own dreams. He bought us a brownstone in Back Bay, the kind of house I'd walked past 1,000 times and never imagined living in. He encouraged me to travel, to visit the museums I'd only read about, to see the paintings I'd only seen in books. I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. But looking back now, I can see the cracks that were there from the beginning. The way Michael would check his phone during dinner and then quickly turn it face down. The business trips that seemed to multiply as the years went on. 2 a month, then 3, then 4. The way he'd sometimes look at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between tenderness and guilt. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself all marriages required trust. I trusted him completely. The first real warning sign came in our 3rd year of marriage, the winter before our daughter was born. I was 6 months pregnant, huge and uncomfortable, craving Thai food at all hours of the night. Michael was supposed to be at a conference in San Francisco, a 3-day thing for his investment firm. On the second night, I couldn't sleep. The baby was kicking, my back was aching, and I had the worst heartburn of my life. I picked up my phone to text Michael just to tell him I missed him, and I saw something that made my stomach drop. A notification from our credit card company, a charge for $347 at a restaurant I'd never heard of, in Miami. Not San Francisco, Miami. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. My first thought was fraud. Someone had stolen his credit card information. I almost called the bank right then, but something stopped me. Some instinct I didn't want to acknowledge. Instead, I Googled the restaurant. It was a high-end Cuban place, the kind with a tasting menu and a wine list longer than my arm. The kind of place you took someone you wanted to impress. I called Michael. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him. No response. At 2 a.m., unable to sleep, unable to stop my mind from racing, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into his email. The password was our wedding anniversary, June 14th, 2014. He'd told me once, joking, that he'd never forget it that way. I found the confirmation. A round-trip flight from Boston to Miami, not San Francisco. A hotel reservation at a boutique place in South Beach. 1 room, 1 king bed, 2 guests. The second guest's name was listed as Jessica Chen. Jessie. My whole body went cold. I remember exactly how the moonlight was falling through our bedroom window, how the baby kicked once, hard, right under my ribs, how the world seemed to tilt on its axis. But then I told myself I was being crazy, paranoid, hormonal. Jessica Chen was a common name, and Jessie's last name was Martinez, not Chen. She'd married someone briefly in her early 20s. Could she have gone back to a maiden name I didn't know about? No, that didn't make sense either. I was being ridiculous. I closed the email. I didn't say anything when Michael came home, didn't mention the charge or the flight or any of it. He brought me back a souvenir, a little cable car ornament from San Francisco. He told me about the conference, about the boring presentations and the overpriced hotel bar. I smiled and nodded and told myself it was nothing, but I kept watching. I couldn't help it. Over the next year, I started noticing patterns. Michael's conferences always seemed to happen at the same time Jessie had work trips for her consulting firm. He'd come home smelling like a perfume that wasn't mine, something with jasmine and vanilla that I later recognized as Jessie's signature scent when she hugged me. He'd be distracted for days after coming back, checking his regular phone constantly, then slowly returning to normal. I never found concrete proof, just suspicions, just coincidences that added up to a weight I carried in my chest every day. And through it all, Jessie remained my best friend. She was there when I gave birth to Emma, holding my hand through 16 hours of labor when Michael was stuck on a delayed flight from London. She babysat when Michael and I needed date nights. She remembered Emma's birthday, her allergies, her favorite princess. She was the perfect godmother, the perfect friend, the perfect liar. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I confront them? Why didn't I demand answers, hire a private investigator, do something other than bury my head in the sand? The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of being wrong and looking paranoid. Afraid of being right and losing everything. I had a baby, a beautiful home, a comfortable life. Michael was a good father to Emma. Attentive, patient, present. He coached her soccer team. He read her bedtime stories. He held her when she had nightmares. I told myself that whatever was happening, if anything was happening, I could survive it as long as he kept being a good father, as long as he kept coming home to us, as long as we could keep pretending everything was fine. For 12 years, that's exactly what we did. Emma grew into a bright, beautiful girl with Michael's eyes and my stubborn streak. I eventually went back to work, curating at a museum in Cambridge, finally achieving the career I'd put on hold. Michael's business continued to thrive. We took vacations, Paris, Rome, Tokyo. We hosted dinner parties. We looked like the perfect family in every photo, and Jessie was there through all of it. Birthday parties and Christmas dinners and summer barbecues. She was at Emma's dance recitals and school plays. She was the first person I called when I had good news and bad news. She knew every detail of my marriage, every argument Michael and I had, every insecurity I harbored about our age difference and his travel schedule and the walls I sometimes felt he put up. I told her everything. She used all of it against me. The week before Michael died, I noticed something different about him. He seemed lighter somehow, more energetic. He was whistling while he made coffee in the morning, something he hadn't done in years. He suggested we take Emma to the aquarium that Saturday, and he actually left his phone in the car the whole time. He held my hand as we walked through the exhibits. I remember thinking, maybe we've turned a corner. Maybe whatever crisis he's been going through is finally over. Maybe we're going to be okay. That Sunday, he told me about the Chicago conference. 3 days of meetings with potential investors. Very important. Couldn't miss it. His flight was Tuesday morning. I helped him pack. I picked out his tie, the blue one that brought out his eyes. I kissed him goodbye at the door and told him to call when he landed. He said he would. He said he loved me. He said he'd be home before I knew it. 43 minutes before his heart stopped, he texted his mistress that he was finally leaving me. I found out about all of this 3 weeks after his funeral. 3 weeks of Jessie sleeping in my guest room, making me tea, forcing me to eat, telling me I would survive this. 3 weeks of her holding me while I cried, of her picking Emma up from school when I couldn't get out of bed, of her being everything a best friend should be. 3 weeks of her lying to my face while she planned how to collect on my husband's life insurance. Because here's the thing I haven't told you yet. When I went through that phone, really went through it, reading every message, every email, looking at every photo, I discovered something even more devastating than the affair. Michael had taken out a second life insurance policy 4 years ago, $2 million. And the beneficiary wasn't me. It was Jessica Martinez. The night I discovered the phone, I sat alone in my bedroom until 3 a.m, reading through years of messages between my husband and my best friend. Emma was asleep down the hall. Jessie had gone home that afternoon, saying she needed to check on her own apartment, but she'd be back in the morning. I read their entire love story, start to finish. They'd met before I did. That was the first revelation. Michael and Jessie had dated briefly in their early 20s, before either of them knew me. They'd broken up when Michael moved to New York for his first job, and they'd lost touch for almost 15 years, until my wedding. The first messages on the phone were from the week after Michael and I got married. Jessie had texted him something innocuous. "It was so good to see you. You looked happy. I'm glad." He'd responded, "I was happy to see you, too. More than I expected." And from there, it had grown. Slowly at first. Just checking in, just catching up, just innocent conversation between two people who shared a history. But by our first anniversary, the messages had changed. They were longer, more personal, more intimate. "I think about you all the time," Michael had written. "When I'm at dinner with Rachel, I imagine it's you across the table." "I know," Jessie had replied. "I think about you too. But she's my best friend. We can't." I know we can't." For 3 years, they'd circled each other, wanting but not acting, confessing feelings but maintaining boundaries. I could almost admire their restraint if it weren't so devastating to read. The first time they crossed the line was the Miami trip, the one I'd discovered on our credit card, the one I'd convinced myself was nothing. Jessie had texted Michael afterward, "I can't believe that just happened." Me neither. I've wanted that for so long. "What do we do now?" "I don't know. I just know I can't stop." And he didn't. They didn't. For 9 years, they'd carried on their affair under my nose. Business trips that were really romantic getaways. Afternoons when Jessie came over to visit while Michael worked from home. Hotel rooms and rental cars and burner phones that I never knew existed. I found photos of them together, on beaches I'd never visited, in restaurants I'd never heard of, in hotel rooms I couldn't recognize. Jessie wearing swimsuits and lingerie, looking at the camera with an expression I'd never seen on her face. Seductive, triumphant, possessed. And Michael, my husband, looking at her like she hung the moon and the stars. I made myself read every single message, All 3,422 of them. I needed to understand. I needed to know how deep the betrayal went. It went deeper than I could have imagined. They didn't just meet up for sex, although there was plenty of that. They planned a future together. They talked about where they'd live once Michael left me, what they'd do with their money, how they'd handle the transition with Emma. Emma, my daughter. They talked about her like she was a minor inconvenience, a logistical challenge to be managed. Jessie, who claimed to love my daughter like her own, had written, "Once you have primary custody, we can start to ease into things. Kids are resilient. She'll adjust." Primary custody. They were going to take my daughter away from me. Michael had replied, "My lawyer says it shouldn't be hard. Rachel's work schedule is demanding, and she has a history of anxiety. We can make a case that I'm the more stable parent." A history of anxiety. He was going to use my mental health against me. The panic attacks I'd had after my father died, the therapy I'd sought to deal with them, the vulnerability I'd trusted him with. He was going to weaponize all of it. I felt like I was going to be sick. The insurance policy was discussed extensively in the messages. Michael had taken it out as a precaution, he said, in case something happened to him before he could finalize the divorce. He wanted to make sure Jessie was taken care of. "Rachel will get the house and half my assets," he'd written, "but you deserve more. You've waited so long. This policy is my promise to you. Even if I die before we can be together, you'll be taken care of." $2 million. My husband's way of taking care of his mistress, even from beyond the grave. The universe had other plans, though. Michael died before he could leave me, before he could take our daughter, before he could destroy everything I'd built. And now I had a choice to make. I could destroy the phone, pretend I'd never found it, cash his main life insurance policy, the one that was still in my name, sell the house, and move on with my life. Let Jessie collect her secret $2 million and never speak to her again. Avoid the scandal, protect Emma from the truth, maintain the illusion of a happy marriage cut tragically short, or I could burn it all down. I sat in my bedroom until the sun came up, turning the phone over and over in my hands, trying to decide what kind of woman I wanted to be. Okay, I need to pause here for a second. If you discovered something like this, what would you do? Would you keep quiet to protect yourself and your child? Or would you need the truth to come out, no matter what it cost? Type your answer in the comments. And if this story is hitting close to home, please hit that like button so more people can find it. At 7 a.m, I heard Emma's footsteps in the hallway. She was 11 years old enough to pour her own cereal, but still young enough to want me to do it. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and walked out to meet her. "Morning, Mom," she said, yawning. "Is Aunt Jessie coming over today?" Aunt Jessie. The words felt like a knife in my chest. "Not today, sweetheart," I said. "Just us." I made her pancakes, her father's recipe, thick and fluffy with chocolate chips, and watched her eat while I pretended to drink coffee I couldn't taste. She talked about school, about her best friend Katie's upcoming birthday party, about the Halloween costume she wanted to make. Normal 11-year-old things. She didn't know her world was about to shatter. I wasn't going to be the one to shatter it. Not yet, not until I had a plan. After I dropped Emma at school, I drove straight to my lawyer's office. David Chen had handled our estate planning for years. He'd known Michael, had golfed with Michael, had been at our anniversary parties. But he was my lawyer too, and I needed someone I could trust. I told him everything. I showed him the phone, the messages, the insurance policy. He read through it all with an expression that went from confused to horrified to coldly furious. "This is fraud," he said finally. "Taking out a life insurance policy with a hidden beneficiary while married, without disclosing it in your estate documents, That's grounds to challenge the policy itself. Can I do that? Challenge it? You can. It'll be messy. It'll go public. But yes, you have standing to contest this policy based on fraud and concealment. He paused. Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Did you have any idea about this relationship before today? I thought about the Miami trip, the perfume, the patterns I'd noticed and chosen to ignore. I had suspicions, I admitted. Years ago. I never found proof. Did you ever confront Michael about them? No. David nodded slowly. That's actually better for our case. It shows you weren't complicit in any of this. You were a faithful wife who was deceived. He leaned forward. Here's what I recommend. We need to document everything before you confront Jessica. We need records of the policy, records of the affair, anything we can use to establish a pattern of deception. Then we file a claim with the insurance company contesting the secret policy. What happens to Jessie? If we can prove she knowingly participated in fraud, which these messages strongly suggest, she could face criminal charges. At minimum, she won't see a penny of that $2 million. I sat with that for a moment. Criminal charges, Jessie in handcuffs. The woman who'd held my hand through labor, who'd been there for every milestone of my daughter's life, locked in a cell. Part of me felt sick at the thought. A larger part felt something close to satisfaction. Do it, I said. Document everything. I want to know exactly what she knew and when she knew it. Over the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the grieving widow, returning to work at the museum, managing Emma's schedule, accepting casseroles and sympathy cards from well-meaning neighbors. I let Jessie continue to visit, continued to accept her help, continued to act like the heartbroken best friend she expected me to be. At night, I worked with David and a private investigator he'd brought in to build our case. The investigator, a former FBI agent named Marcus, was thorough in a way that should have scared me, but instead felt like validation. He found everything. The apartment Jessie had rented in the same building as Michael's office, the one she claimed was for her commute, but was actually their meeting place. The joint bank account they'd opened under false names. The wedding dress Jessie had purchased 3 months before Michael's death, a designer gown from a boutique in New York, paid for with a check from that joint account. She'd been planning to marry him. She had the dress. Marcus also found something that changed everything. Records from Michael's cardiologist. Michael had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition 2 years before his death. He'd known his heart was failing. He'd been told he needed surgery, a procedure that would have given him decades more to live. But he'd refused. Too risky, too much recovery time, too likely to interfere with his plans. His doctor had documented everything. The diagnosis, the recommended treatment, Michael's refusal, and the conversation where Michael had asked, point blank, how much time he had left without surgery. 5 years at most, the doctor had written, possibly less if he doesn't reduce stress and improve his lifestyle. Michael knew he was dying. He'd chosen not to tell me. And he'd taken out that life insurance policy on Jessie's behalf right after his diagnosis, naming her as beneficiary while he was still insurable, before his condition could be discovered by the insurance company. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plan to defraud me and provide for his mistress after his death. The night I discovered the medical records, I sat in David's office and cried for the first time since I'd found the phone. Not out of grief for Michael. That had burned away weeks ago. I cried out of relief. Relief that I hadn't been crazy. That the walls I'd felt, the distance I'd sensed, the instinct that something was wrong, all of it had been real. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't insecure. I'd been lied to by the 2 people I trusted most in the world, and my instincts had tried to warn me. I just hadn't listened. What do we do now? I asked David, wiping my face. Now, he said, we plan the confrontation. I wanted it to be public. I know that sounds petty, maybe even cruel. But after 12 years of being gaslit, of having my suspicions dismissed, of being made to feel like the unstable one, I needed witnesses. I needed the world to see who Jessie really was. Thanksgiving was coming up. Jessie had invited herself to our family dinner the way she did every year. You shouldn't be alone for the holidays, she'd said, and I'd agreed, my face a mask of grateful sadness. But I'd also invited other guests. My mother, who had finally apologized for pushing me toward Michael all those years ago. My sister, Beth, who had driven down from New Hampshire the moment she heard about the phone. David Chen and his wife. And Marcus, the investigator, who had agreed to be there as a family friend. The table was set for 12. The trap was set for 1. Thanksgiving morning dawned gray and cold, typical for late November in Boston, the kind of day where the sky looks like dirty cotton and the wind cuts through every layer you wear. I was up at 5, unable to sleep, putting the turkey in the oven while the house was still dark and silent. Emma had spent the night at my mother's. I told her it was a special grandmother-granddaughter sleepover, that I needed time to prepare for the big dinner. She'd believed me, excited to have her grandmother's undivided attention. The truth was, I couldn't have my daughter in the house for what was about to happen. By noon, the house was warm and fragrant with roasting turkey and fresh bread. I'd set the table with our good china, the Wedgwood service we'd received as a wedding gift. Candles flickered in the hurricane holders. A centerpiece of autumn flowers and gourds sat in the middle of the table. Everything looked perfect, elegant, like a magazine spread. No one walking in would have guessed it was a battlefield. My mother arrived first, at 1 o'clock. She hugged me tightly in the doorway, longer than usual, and I felt her hand smooth over my hair the way she used to when I was a child. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "I'm sure." "I'm proud of you, Rachel. Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you." Beth came next, with her husband Tom and their twin teenagers. David and his wife arrived at 2, then Marcus at 2:15, dressed in khakis and a sport coat like any other family friend. And then, at 2:30 on the dot, Jessie pulled into my driveway. I watched her from the window as she got out of her car. She was carrying a pie, pumpkin probably, the same one she brought every year, and wearing a cream-colored sweater that probably cost $500. Her hair was perfectly blown out. Her makeup was subtle and expensive. She looked like she was walking into her own home. In a way, she thought she was. In a few months, she probably expected to be living here, sleeping in my bed, using my kitchen, raising my daughter. I opened the door before she could knock. "Happy Thanksgiving," she said, smiling that warm, familiar smile I'd trusted for 20 years. "It smells amazing in here." "Thanks," I said. "Come in. Everyone's already here." I saw her eyes flicker over the assembled group, my mother, my sister, the stranger she didn't recognize. "Quite the gathering," she said lightly. "I thought it was just going to be us." "I wanted to be surrounded by people I love," I said. "You understand." Something in my tone must have registered because I saw her smile falter for just a moment. But then it was back, bright and steady. "Of course, that's so important right now." I took her pie and led her into the living room, where everyone was gathered with glasses of wine. David stood as she entered, extending his hand. "David Chen," he said. "I'm Rachel's attorney." Jessie's hand froze midway through the handshake. "Her attorney?" "Estate matters," I said smoothly. "You know how complicated these things get. David's been invaluable." "Right, of course." Jessie accepted a glass of wine from my sister, but I noticed her hand was shaking slightly. "I didn't realize you were handling the estate so quickly." "I believe in being thorough," I said. "Speaking of which, There's something I need to discuss with everyone before dinner. Would you all mind taking your seats in the dining room?" The group moved slowly, glasses in hand, to the table I'd so carefully arranged. I'd placed Jessie's seat at the far end, facing me across the length of the table. I wanted to see her face clearly when everything came out. Once everyone was settled, I remained standing at the head of the table. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but my voice was steady. Years of public speaking for the museum had prepared me for this moment. I knew how to command a room, how to hold attention, how to deliver devastating news with measured calm. "I want to thank everyone for being here," I said. "The past few weeks have been the hardest of my life. Losing Michael was devastating enough. But what I discovered afterward," I paused, taking a breath. "What I discovered made me question everything I thought I knew." I saw Jessie's face go pale. She knew. She had to know. But she stayed silent, frozen, as I reached into the sideboard behind me and pulled out the burner phone. "Michael was buried with this phone in his pocket," I said. "A second phone I never knew existed. When I charged it and looked inside, I found thousands of messages between my husband and someone he'd been having an affair with for almost a decade." Gasps around the table. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Beth's husband, Tom, looked down at his plate, uncomfortable. But all I could see was Jessie, her face draining of color, her wine glass trembling in her grip. "The last message," I continued, "was sent 43 minutes before Michael's heart attack. It said, and I quote, 'I told her I was in Chicago, flying to meet you in the Bahamas tonight. I'm finally leaving her, this time for real. I love you, Jay.'" I looked directly at Jessie. "Would you like to tell everyone who Jay is, Jessie, or should I?" The room went absolutely silent. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, the wind rattling the windows, someone's sharp intake of breath. Every eye at the table turned toward Jessie. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face. Something between terror and calculation, like a cornered animal deciding whether to fight or flee. Then she laughed. It was a short, brittle sound, completely wrong for the moment. "Rachel, I don't know what you think you found, but I found everything, Jessie." I pulled a folder from the sideboard, the one Marcus had prepared, thick with printed documents and photographs. "I found the apartment you rented in his office building, the joint bank account, the wedding dress you bought 3 months before he died." I opened the folder and began passing pages down the table. Photos of them together on beaches and in restaurants. Bank statements showing the joint account with over $400,000 in it. Screenshots of messages so explicit I'd redacted them before sharing. "I found the life insurance policy," I said. "The $2 million policy he took out in secret, with you as beneficiary. Did you know he had a heart condition, Jessie? That he knew he was dying? That he took out that policy specifically to provide for you after his death while leaving me with nothing?" Jessie's face had gone from pale to gray. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "Rachel, please. You have to understand. I understand everything." My voice was steady, calm. I felt like I was floating above the scene, watching it happen to someone else. "I understand that you slept with my husband for 9 years. I understand that you sat in my home, ate my food, held my hand at his funeral while planning how to spend the insurance money he'd hidden from me. I understand that you helped him document my mental health issues so he could take my daughter away." That last part made Beth gasp out loud. "He was going to take Emma?" They discussed it at length. I pulled out the relevant printouts. Here are the messages where they planned their custody strategy. They were going to claim I was an unfit mother because I'd sought therapy after Dad died. They thought my anxiety made me unstable. I looked at Jessie again. She was crying now, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Good. She deserved to cry. The irony is, Jessie, if you'd just been patient a little longer, you would have gotten everything you wanted. Michael's heart attack was unexpected. His doctor said he had a few more years. If he'd lived long enough to divorce me, you'd be sitting here as his widow right now, not me. Rachel. Jessie's voice was a croak. Please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You've been lying to me for 20 years. Our entire friendship has been a lie. You were never my friend. You were just waiting for your turn. I turned to David. Would you like to update everyone on the legal situation? David stood, adjusting his glasses. We filed a claim with the insurance company contesting the secret policy. Based on the evidence of fraud, specifically the concealment of both the affair and Michael's pre-existing condition, we expect the claim to be denied and the policy voided. Additionally, we've reported the joint bank account to the appropriate authorities. Those funds, accumulated during a marriage through fraudulent means, are subject to seizure and redistribution to the surviving spouse. You can't do that, Jessie said, her voice rising. That money is mine. Michael wanted me to have it. Michael was married to Rachel, David said coolly. He had no legal right to hide assets or take out secret life insurance policies without his spouse's knowledge. What he wanted is irrelevant. What matters is what the law says. I'll fight this, Jessie said, standing so abruptly her chair scraped across the hardwood. I'll hire my own lawyer. You can't prove any of this. Marcus stood as well, reaching into his jacket pocket. Actually, Ms. Martinez, I can. I'm a licensed private investigator, and I've spent 3 weeks documenting every aspect of your relationship with the deceased. I have credit card receipts, hotel records, cell phone data, and approximately 200 hours of surveillance footage. You've made yourself very easy to track. He pulled out a business card and slid it across the table to her. You'll also want to consult with a criminal attorney. Insurance fraud is a felony in Massachusetts. So is conspiracy to commit fraud, which is what you and Michael were doing when you took out that policy knowing about his heart condition. Jessie's face crumpled. The sophisticated mask was gone now, replaced by something raw and desperate. I loved him, she said, her voice breaking. I know that doesn't matter to you, but I loved him. I've loved him since I was 22 years old. When I saw him at your wedding, I thought I would die. You had everything I wanted, and I had to stand there and smile and act like I was happy for you. So you decided to take it, I said. Piece by piece, over 20 years, you decided to take my husband, my trust, my daughter, my money, because you felt entitled to it. I didn't plan it, she sobbed. It just happened. And once it started, I couldn't stop. Neither of us could. He was going to leave you, Rachel. He'd been trying to leave you for years. He stayed because of Emma, because he didn't want to hurt her, but he was miserable. You made him miserable. I made him miserable? I felt the first crack in my composure, heat rising in my chest. I loved him. I trusted him. I built a life with him. And you were supposed to be my best friend. You were supposed to be the one person I could count on. I'm sorry, Jessie whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't begin to cover it. I walked slowly around the table, stopping a few feet from where she stood. Do you remember what you said to me at his funeral, when I was standing by his casket, trying not to collapse? Jessie shook her head mutely. You said he loved you so much, Rachel. Don't ever forget how much he loved you. I let the words hang in the air. You stood there, knowing you were about to collect $2 million from his secret insurance policy, knowing he'd been planning to leave me for you, and you told me he loved me. What kind of monster does that? I was trying to comfort you. You were covering your tracks. I finally raised my voice, and it felt good. It felt powerful. It felt like something I should have done years ago. Everything you've ever said to me has been a manipulation. Every hug, every phone call, every "I love you." None of it was real. I was just an obstacle in your way. I stepped back, taking a breath, recentering myself. The room was absolutely silent. My mother was crying quietly. Beth had her hand over her mouth. Even the teenagers looked stunned. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm again. "You're going to leave my house right now. You're going to hire a lawyer because you're going to need one. The insurance claim will be contested, and you will not receive a penny of that $2 million. The money in the joint account will be frozen pending investigation. If you're lucky, you'll avoid criminal charges. But I wouldn't count on it." "And Emma?" Jesse's voice was barely audible. "Emma will never see you again. You will not contact her. You will not send her gifts. You will not come within 500 feet of her school or her activities. If you try, I will file a restraining order." "You can't keep me from her. She's my goddaughter." "She's my daughter." I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone jump. "She's my daughter, and you tried to take her from me. You don't get to play the loving aunt anymore. You don't get to pretend you care about her while you were plotting to steal her father away. You're done, Jesse. We're done." For a long moment, Jesse just stared at me. The tears had stopped now, and something cold crept into her eyes. A glimpse of the real Jesse, the one who'd been lying to me for 2 decades. "You think you're so righteous," she said quietly. "But you know why Michael came to me? Because you were boring, Rachel. You were predictable. You were so focused on being the perfect wife and mother that you forgot to be a person. He needed someone who actually saw him, who challenged him, who made him feel alive. That was never going to be you." I should have been hurt. A month ago, that comment would have devastated me. But something had shifted in me over the past few weeks. I'd read every message, seen every photo, cataloged every lie. I knew exactly who Michael was and who Jesse was. Their opinions of me no longer had the power to wound. "If I'm so boring," I said calmly, "why did he stay with me for 12 years? Why did he come home every night, sleep in my bed, build a life with me? Maybe because, deep down, he knew you weren't worth throwing it away for. Maybe you were just his secret entertainment, something to make him feel excited while he built his real life with someone else." Jesse's face twisted with rage. For a moment, I thought she might hit me. But then she grabbed her purse from the back of her chair and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this," she said, turning back one last time. "When you're alone and Emma's grown and you have no one left, you'll regret pushing me away." "I doubt it," I said. "Goodbye, Jessie." The door slammed behind her. For a long moment, no one moved. Then my mother stood, crossed the room, and wrapped her arms around me. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "That took so much courage." Beth joined the hug, then her husband, then David's wife, until I was surrounded by people who actually loved me, who had nothing to gain from my pain, who were there simply because they cared. I let myself cry then. Not for Michael, not for Jesse, but for the woman I'd been, the one who had doubted herself for so long, who had mistaken loyalty for love, who had let fear keep her silent. That woman was gone. I was someone new now, someone stronger. "All right, I want to check in with you again. If you were in my position, would you have confronted Jesse publicly like this, or would you have handled it privately? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. And if you're dying to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed." The weeks after Thanksgiving were chaos. Jesse hired a lawyer, an expensive one from a flashy downtown firm, and contested the insurance claim. She argued that Michael had the right to name any beneficiary he wanted, that their relationship was genuine love and not some scheme to defraud me. Her lawyer tried to paint me as a jealous, vindictive woman trying to steal what was rightfully hers. It didn't work. The insurance company's own investigators had already flagged the policy as suspicious. When they saw our evidence, the concealed heart condition, the timing of the policy, the joint accounts, and hidden assets, they denied Jesse's claim within 60 days. The $2 million she'd been counting on vanished like smoke. The joint bank account was frozen while authorities investigated its origins. Most of the money turned out to be Michael's, accumulated through creative accounting that his business partners were very interested to learn about. The investigation expanded, uncovering years of financial misdeeds I'd never known about. The firm he'd built was put under audit. Several of his colleagues were subpoenaed. I learned more about my husband in those months than I had in 12 years of marriage. Jesse wasn't charged criminally. The prosecutors decided there wasn't enough evidence to prove she'd known about Michael's heart condition when the policy was taken out. But she lost everything else. Her consulting firm quietly let her go when the scandal broke. Her other friends, our mutual friends, I should say, cut ties one by one as the truth came out. She sold her apartment and moved to Florida, disappearing from Boston's social circles, like she'd never existed. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to reach out to me once, about 6 months after Thanksgiving. She wrote a letter, a long one apparently, full of explanations and apologies and requests for forgiveness. I never read it. My mother intercepted it in my mailbox and threw it away without telling me. I only found out about it a year later, and by then I was grateful. Some things aren't worth forgiving. Emma took the news about her father better than I expected. I waited until after Christmas to tell her. I wanted to give her one last holiday of innocence, one last season of believing her father had been a good man who loved us. But eventually, she started asking questions I couldn't answer with lies. We sat in her room one January afternoon, just the two of us, and I told her an age-appropriate version of the truth, that her father had made some choices that hurt our family, that he'd had a relationship with someone else, someone we both knew, that the insurance policies were being sorted out in court because there had been some confusion about the paperwork. I didn't tell her about the custody scheme. I didn't tell her about the messages calling her a logistical challenge. Some things she never needs to know. Emma cried. She raged. She refused to speak to me for 3 days, blaming me for destroying her memory of her father. But slowly, with time and therapy and conversations that lasted deep into the night, she started to understand. "Why did he do it?" she asked me once, months later. We were sitting on the back porch, watching fireflies light up the summer evening. She was 12 by then, older than her years, forced to grow up too fast. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly. "I think he wanted things he couldn't have. I think he convinced himself that he could have everything, the family and the secret relationship, the respectable life and the exciting affair. Some people can't choose. They want it all, even when wanting it all hurts everyone around them." Was it my fault? The question broke my heart. "No, baby, never. None of this was your fault. This was about your father's choices and Jesse's choices. You were the best thing in his life. The part of him that loved you, that was real. I truly believe that." I don't know if I do believe it, but my daughter needed to hear it, and maybe that's what matters. The financial fallout took over a year to resolve. Michael's estate was more complicated than anyone had expected. The secret accounts, the suspicious transactions, the policies and debts and obligations I'd never known about. David guided me through all of it, patient and thorough, never once making me feel stupid for not having known what my husband was doing behind my back. In the end, after all the legal fees and settlements and investigations, I was left with the house, paid off, thankfully, before Michael died, a modest life insurance payout from his main policy, and enough savings to support Emma and me for several years if I was careful. It was less than I'd expected when I thought I was married to a successful businessman. It was more than I'd feared when I realized how many secrets he'd been keeping. I went back to work at the museum full-time. The curating job I'd loved, the one Michael had always encouraged me to treat as a hobby rather than a career, became my lifeline. I threw myself into exhibitions and research, rediscovering the passion that had drawn me to art history in the first place. My colleagues became friends. My work became a source of pride instead of an afterthought. Emma adjusted, the way children do. She went to therapy twice a week for a year, working through her grief and anger with a counselor who specialized in family trauma. She made new friends at school, girls who didn't know her father, who liked her for who she was instead of what her family looked like from the outside. She joined the debate team and discovered she was excellent at arguing, which surprised no one who had watched her navigate a house full of lies. We built a new life together, the two of us. Smaller than before, maybe. Quieter, but infinitely more honest. The first anniversary of Michael's death fell on a Tuesday in October. I took the day off work and drove to the cemetery where he was buried. I hadn't been there since the funeral. I hadn't felt ready to face his grave, to stand over the body of a man who had betrayed me so completely. But I needed closure. I needed to say something, even if he couldn't hear it. The cemetery was beautiful in the autumn light, leaves scattered across the graves like offerings. I found his headstone easily, marble, dignified, inscribed with words I'd chosen before I knew the truth. Beloved husband and father. The words felt hollow now. I stood there for a long time, not crying, not speaking, just breathing. I loved you, I finally said. I loved you so much that I ignored every warning sign. I made myself small so you could feel big. I gave you everything I had, and you gave me lies. The wind rustled through the trees. A crow called somewhere in the distance. I don't hate you, I continued.